Hi, I'm Jennifer and this is Kate, and today we have a movie review for you, Padre Pio starring Shia Labeouf.
So this movie has had a lot of hype around it recently because A, Padre Pio movie, and then B, the actor who played Padre Pio underwent a conversion experience while filming it. So we were really excited about this movie and have just been waiting for an opportunity to get to see it.
But then we started hearing that maybe this movie isn't quite what you're expecting. We read a couple of reviews that had us doubting, should we even see this movie?
Well, spoiler alert, we did watch the movie and it definitely was not what we were expecting. There were some parts we liked and some parts we didn't.
And there were definitely a few surprises along the way. So today we're just going to tell you what we thought about the movie, and if you're on the fence trying to decide, should I see it, should I not, we hope the review will be helpful.
So let's go ahead and get started.
So what is the movie about? It is called Padre Pio, but surprisingly, the movie isn't really about Padre Pio. I mean, don't get me wrong, he is in there for sure, but really the main focus of the movie is the political struggle that was going on in Italy between the communists and the socialists right after World War I.
So it is pretty much 80% politics and maybe generously 20% Padre Pio. It's a lot.
Not a lot of Padre Pio.
Yeah, it's a lot of politics and then Padre Pio struggling against the devil in the background.
So that's what the movie is about, but what was the movie like?
Well, it was very unique, we will say that. It definitely has a different feel to it.
So if you have ever seen the movie Schindler's List, then the cinematography in Padre Pio will remind you a lot of that. It's a very serious, sober movie. The sky is gray and dark and overcast the whole time. There's no sunshine and no one laughs or smiles ever.
Yeah. There's a lot of close-ups of people's faces as they react to the things going on around them. So it's very intense and very violent at times.
And it was also interesting in that we didn't get to know many of the characters' names. Like, nobody had a name. So we just had to learn to recognize everyone by sight,
which was very confusing at times.
We just couldn't tell, like, who is that or what's happening.
I know.
Yeah, sometimes we didn't know what was happening.
At all. We just had one point where we just both looked at each other and were like, do you know what's going on? Do you know who that is?
Yeah,
because
I
I'm
have no
confused.
idea. But despite all that, there were things that we really did like about the movie.
For instance, there was one really cool scene between Padre Pio and the Blessed Mother in the beginning of the movie. It only lasted about 10 seconds, but we still really liked it.
And then at the end of the movie, there was another scene with Padre Pio and Jesus. It was a little bit longer, and it was so moving. It was definitely well done.
And then also Shia Labeouf was a really good choice to play Padre Pio. He really does look like him and he did a good job acting.
The scenes of Padre Pio saying Mass, those were just so beautiful. And then there were a few scenes where he's interacting with different people and his love and compassion for them just shines through.
And the movie also does a really good job of showing that we all have suffering and struggle in our lives, even the future saints.
And then, of course, it made us really glad for our blessings and the modern life we have. Life in Italy after World War I, it was hard. There was so much poverty. There was so much grief from the war, the loss of lives, the loss of loved ones, and of course, all of the political unrest. So yeah, definitely, those were not fun times.
So those were the good things, but of course, there were things that we didn't like. The plot was confusing. Like we said, not a lot of people had names, and it was also hard to tell how much time was passing. We had to look it up after the movie to figure out that it supposedly covers a 2-year time span.
Yeah, it was just hard to get any sense of time. Also, it felt like the movie was actually two different movies, one political movie and then one little sideshow about Padre Pio. The two movies didn't seem to interact very much at all. It felt like they were just smashed together.
They didn't interact.
Yeah, I don't think they did. It was just like all globbed together into one movie.
Yeah. And there was also a decent bit of profanity in this movie, which we didn't really appreciate.
Yeah, we're not big fans of foul language, and especially hearing Padre Pio curse. I mean, there was one scene where he just lets it fly, and we just had to wonder, would he have done that in real life?
I mean, we weren't there, so we don't know, but it just doesn't seem very likely.
But what I really disliked about the movie most was the adult content, which was nudity. Now, the movie is rated R, but the reviews that I read beforehand didn't mention this specifically. And I don't know, maybe I didn't read enough reviews or the right reviews, but I didn't get it that this was the adult content.
So we can't help but wonder if those scenes were really necessary. Yes, the devil did harass and tempt Padre Pio, but I think we could have gotten the gist of that without it being so explicitly graphic.
Fortunately, we were streaming this movie at home because the nearest theater to us showing it was 150 miles away. So we were able to fast forward through the worst of the adult scenes. So that was good.
And like we have mentioned before, the movie is very violent, though that does go along with the turbulent times. We will give them that. But the movie is also just very focused on the negative of everything. There isn't any sort of lighthearted scene in this movie.
It was definitely a downer for sure. And the funny thing is that we know from reading extensively about Padre Pio that he had a sense of humor. He was known to smile, to laugh, and to joke. So it was a little bit distressing to us that throughout this whole movie, he was portrayed in this constant state of angst and suffering and just, unhappiness.
So who would we say this movie is for? Well, possibly history buffs. You might like it. And then also if you are a die-hard Padre Pio fan who's seen everything else about him, you might want to watch it just to keep up your streak.
Who is this movie not for? It is definitely not for families. It is definitely not for the under 18 crowd. There is just too much graphic stuff going on in this movie.
And it's also not for anyone looking for a biography of Padre Pio because it covers just a very short period in his life.
So did we like this movie? Honestly, no. And it wasn't because that it was a bad movie in terms of bad acting or like a low budget feel, anything like that. That was not the case.
Nope. It was just too confusing and too graphic in parts, and we're honestly not really sure what the point of this movie was, other than showing how very hard life in Italy was at this time.
So it was just so different from what we were expecting. We thought it was going to be all about Padre Pio, and it wasn't. So that was a surprise and honestly somewhat of a disappointment.
So would we watch it again? No, we wouldn't. Once and done.
Saw it once, I'm good. So I know that I will probably never watch this movie again, and yet I do find that as time passes, my mind is sort of filtering out all the graphic stuff, the violence, the stuff I didn't like, and just remembering and focusing on those beautiful scenes with Padre Pio. For example, in one scene, there is, like a homeless guy, or maybe he was paralyzed, I'm not sure. He was just sitting out in the snow by himself, and Padre Pio just goes out and sits with him. And it's just such a beautiful scene, so moving.
And also the story of how Shia Labeouf experienced a conversion while making this movie is also very beautiful. But honestly, I think that story would make a better movie than the movie itself.
Something to think about. So would we recommend this movie? That's a tough call.
Well,
in general, no. But if you could kind of get a good parts version, like all the beautiful scenes with Padre Pio, then it would be, worth watching, I think.
It would also probably be about 15 minutes max, but
yeah.
Hey, it could be worth it.
Version. Okay, so those are our thoughts about the movie. It was definitely a complex situation going on, a lot to think about, but we hope this review is helpful for you.
And if you have seen this movie, definitely let us know in the comments what you thought.
So as always, we thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye.